Hello, welcome once again to Off the Shelf Books on Tour. I'm your host, Veronica Andrews, and I have a delightful writer with me today, Hallie Ephron. Did I do it right? I didn't do it right. Oh, please introduce yourself.
That's okay. I'm Hallie Ephron. Yeah, you got
I
the
said
last name right.
You'd think I'd get used to this after all these years. I love the book. I loved it because it's people. It's you and me and possibilities that it could actually happen to us.
Yeah, that's what I try to write. I try to write situations that are believable, that you can imagine happening to you, but you hope never does. Yeah. It's really not something you would wish on yourself.
No, but the fact that you and I see things that other people don't see, make mental notes of things, placement of things, it served her well over time. Your heroine, I guess you'd call her.
Yeah.
She's an organizer, and her brain works, I would say, like a honeycomb, so
Yeah.
that these little bits of information, when push came to shove, served her well.
When the book was reviewed in Time magazine by Jamie Lee Curtis,
Ooh.
and I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. I had died and gone to heaven. And she called the main character the kind of Nancy Drew you wish you had
Yes.
for a friend.
Yes.
And she is. She's logical. She's organized. She was a teacher. She's just quit elementary school teaching and started to be a professional organizer, which she's just starting her business. She's gone into business with her best friend, and I wanted to write about. I mean, I've been so fascinated by the craze that Marie Kondo set off with people getting rid of stuff and folding their socks, and just the whole. It's like trying to get a handle on life. I think it's a metaphor for that, and so I wanted to write a story about a woman who was married, a very organized woman, married to a very disorganized man. And I am married to a guy who can't pass a yard sale without stopping. He's one of those. He has many redeeming features. People ask me if he's in the book. He's not in the book, but his stuff is. All of his stuff is in there.
My hubby doesn't do yard sales. He finds it for nothing and brings it home.
Well, my husband used to. My husband's a walker. And he used to, he knows all the garbage routes around our house. You're nodding, right? And he used to, every night, if it was Monday night, he'd go in this direction. If it was Tuesday night, he'd go in that direction. And the same thing, he brought home the Oriental rug that's in our bedroom.
That's what I was just going to say. Nothing that he's ever been given, gifted, come home with hasn't been put to use.
Yeah.
Hasn't been given to somebody who can't afford it, didn't have it.
Right.
Fishing rods. And he sits there and he reels them and he puts hooks on them, puts them over here. And he'll come in one day and he'll start going through the garage like a crazy man because he met a single mother with 3 children and they all want to go fishing.
Oh, that's sweet.
And you know what that would cost, especially if they said, I ain't touching that worm.
Yeah.
And, everything that he finds, I tell you Nancy Drew stories that I love. My public library wouldn't allow Nancy Drew.
Mine either.
And my
when
daughter,
I was growing up.
And my daughter was crazy about him. So I stuck my nose in it and petitioned. And at the time, a young lady in Florida, a little one, had been kidnapped. And she'd been thrown in the trunk of a Ford Fairlane with the very big taillight. And she unscrewed it from the inside and waved her hand out the tail light.
Wow.
And people behind her saw it, went to a payphone, that's how long ago it was, called the police, and they stopped the car and found the girl. And the police asked, how did she know to do that? And she said, because I read Nancy Drew. And my library had my daughter down to stock the shelves with the whole Nancy Drew series. Yeah.
No, in those days they didn't carry the Hardy Boys. Any of the old mystery. Cherry Ames, Nurse. Remember that? Yeah, they didn't. But well, it's not great literature. But neither is Harry Potter.
But it got the kids reading.
Well, exactly.
And they remember what they read,
Yeah.
and it served them well, sort of like our husband's junk.
Yeah, sort of like my husband. So my husband does collect books, and that is something that he often brings home, but more from yard sales than from. But he's always on the lookout for an L. Frank Baum, one of the original Oz books, or and old books play a big part in the story here because
Yes.
there's a second couple that she's trying to help, a woman who she's been a widow for almost exactly a year. And she's just realized that her husband had a storage unit that he'd rented that she has no idea. And, you can imagine.
Well,
So she calls
the
my
organizer.
Emily, and Emily comes and tries to help her sort it out. And when they open it up, I guess I'm trying, it's a book with a lot of surprises in it, so
No
I try
kidding,
not to.
really?
But I will tell, yeah, there's no dead body when she opens the,
Nope.
it's not Silence of the Lambs. I don't write Silence of the Lambs, no. But there are a lot of books. And I had a lot of fun researching that, figuring out what kind of books would a man, and I've tried to imagine what kind of character this dead husband, what would he have collected that he would have treasured so much that he would have hidden them away in a storage unit. And that was interesting, going to all the auction sites and trying
Well,
to
I
figure it
learned
out.
something when I had to ask you what the, go ahead, pronounce it.
Giclée.
Copy.
Yeah, because he also collects prints. And the thing about a print, whether it's a lithograph or whatever it is, an old one, is an expert can usually tell if it's old, except that new technology, now you used to be able to look at it with a fine magnifying glass, and if you could see little dots, well, that was a
The original
printer.
pixel.
That was printer, yeah, not an inked plate, and so. But today, Giclée, which is like a big Xerox, big fancy Xerox, is so precise and so good that it's easy to create forgeries that can fool experts, especially if you print them on old paper. So it's the paper that they look at first. Smell it, touch it, feel it, look for the plate marks, and then look for the dots. And so Giclée is an expensive process, but if it's a valuable map or print or piece of magazine art, it's worth the effort.
Right, and if you're a crook,
Yeah.
and you're trying to get away with something, the sale will benefit the cost that you put into the copy.
Exactly. But so my main character's mother is a librarian, and of course she's the one who knows all about Giclée, and she knows all about how to tell if a book is a library discard, or a book that was perhaps stolen from a library, or a book that was
Not returned.
not returned. Yeah. So she's very important to the plot, and she's a kind of larger than life. Lila.
I liked her.
I like Lila too. Yeah. I thought if I were to write another book, I might give Lila a bigger role. She kind of takes over when
Sparkles.
she's in there. Yeah.
Yeah, but she's very much like someone you know,
I hope.
someone you'd like to grow up to be, and who has the honeycomb mind, who puts this together and that
Yeah.
together, and
Yeah.
something she saw a year ago.
Yeah, it's funny, when I've created Lila, I didn't think about that, but you're absolutely right. Emily is like that. She's an organizer. She likes to label things. She likes to organize things. Her mother, that's what librarians do, is they put numbers on things, they put them on the shelf in order.
And not unlike this position where I read so many different kinds of books that I wouldn't pick up to read. But because they arrive, I read them and I learn.
Yeah.
And I think it makes a better person of me.
Well, I think librarians are the same way, because they're always thinking, on the one hand, as a reader, but on the other hand, as somebody who's going to be sitting at that desk and someone will come in and say,
Do you
I
know
want a
what-
good romance novel, or have you got a book about the tombs in Egypt? And they
One
should
came
know.
in 6 months ago, and I remember putting, that's what I'm saying.
Oh,
You tuck that away, tuck this away, and yet when they need the information, it just surfaces.
you should write mystery novels.
I write good news. That's hard to peddle,
Yeah,
but it's fun.
yeah.
It's fun. Special needs kids played basketball at our high school one night with the equivalent of Harlem Globetrotters. And they were not mean, they were not vindictive, but they bounced the ball off their back, off their head, you know. The crowd was laughing like crazy. And my son looked over at me and I said, "Go get him." And he put the ball between their legs and off of their head and around them. We laughed so hard. Those poor basketball players didn't know what hit them.
Yeah.
So I went home and I wrote "Riot at Woburn High," made the front page above the fold.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, but it got out
Had
there.
you taken pictures?
I was behind a cable camera.
Oh, okay. So you had, yeah.
And somebody from WBZ came in and asked me if they could have the tape because their cameraman hadn't showed up. And I, honest to God, didn't know if I could. I was there for my studio.
Right.
So I called and I asked them. They said yes. And I got gifts to restaurants and a
Oh, that's
bouquet of
nice.
flowers. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But again, here, and here.
Right.
A little bit of this and that, which she collects it all. And I love what she doesn't understand stays right here. The spilled coffee in the coffee shop on leather loafers. And she couldn't figure that out.
Yeah.
She couldn't find a place to tuck that.
Yeah, she's one of those people who looks at a table full of things and says, "What doesn't belong here?" And picks it out. And then doesn't forget that she picked it out. And then later
When she needs it.
it pays off. Yeah. Well, that's the mind of a mystery writer too.
Yeah.
Is that we do that. We write stuff about the setting and what's in the room and what people do and what
Now,
they
is
say.
this the 6th or the 7th book?
This is my 6th standalone novel, but I wrote 5 series mystery novels before it, and I've also written about a half dozen nonfiction books.
So how long have you been writing?
I didn't start writing until I was 40.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was last year?
Yeah, exactly. I wish. I started writing. I come from a writing family. I have 4 writing. There are 4 writing sisters: Nora, Delia, me, and Amy.
Wow.
All published writers. My parents were screenwriters in Hollywood. That's where I grew up, Beverly Hills. And I was the one who said, "I don't write. I'm the one who doesn't write." And my mother was horrified when she heard I wanted to be a teacher, which I did, an elementary school teacher, just like the character in the book, because she had fought the stereotype of a woman as a nurse or a secretary or a
Teacher.
or a stewardess, yeah. And so she made me promise that I wouldn't take any education courses in college, which I didn't. I didn't take any, and that was actually a good idea, because I think you learn a lot more stuff in subject matters than you do in education classes. And then I went and...
And them education books, in
Yeah.
reality and education, are very different.
Have you taught?
My life long.
Okay.
I have a teacher in the house who's very involved in my school system. I raised 11 children.
Oh, okay.
And
Well, I taught elementary school, I taught at the college level, and I still teach. I teach people writing now, but only at workshops. But when I got to be 40, I got a phone call from a freelance writer who asked if she could write a magazine piece about me. And I said, "Why?" She said, "Well, you're the only one who doesn't write." And I said, if anyone's going to write about me not writing, it's going to be me. And at that point, I think I had gotten old enough that I was okay with competing with my sisters, even though I write something none of them do. And I just took courage, and I started to take classes. I joined a writing group. I cut back at work, and eventually, it took me 10 years. My first book was published when I was 50. It's a long haul. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do.
But you do it well.
I do it well, and I've done it well from the beginning. I have the genes. Honestly, that's a big piece of it.
But you
I
also have enough worldliness to know that you have to have a good foundation to put a building on.
Yeah.
So you took your time in
I did.
You weren't gonna. I doubt if you've been tripped up.
Well, I also had saved money. You know, I didn't inherit a lot of money, but my husband's an academic, and I had been working full time, and our kids were now off at college. We had that money put away. I could afford to cut back, and I think it takes so long, and you need time. So I always, I just encourage young writers, you know, and not to be discouraged. It takes a lot of time, and you may not have the resources to do it on your own timetable. You might have to, you know, might have to eat.
I thought the internet and computers would make it easier to get noticed, and easier to get recognized, and easier to publicize.
And it did for a while.
But it doesn't anymore.
No, it doesn't now. It's flooded.
I
read somewhere 1 million books are self-published every year.
I believe it.
I mean, how do you get any visibility? But
Shows
the people
like
who
this?
were early in did better.
Yeah.
And now it's a very tough business.
And yet I had a gentleman here who retired from the FBI. They pay all his expenses. They fly him around the country. When was the last time you heard that one? And this was his first book.
Yeah, yeah.
I almost fell off the chair.
I hope it was good.
Yes, they've already bought the movie rights.
That's good.
And it's going to be a movie. I can't remember.
Well, when the publishing house gets behind you, it's a different story.
But we have trouble getting in touch with the publishing houses.
Really?
Yes. Where I used to be, the books came in automatically, and each person could pick the book they wanted to. I was behind the camera for 10 years. And then the director threw a book at me one day and said, "Show up Monday dressed." It was the 2 Down syndrome boys from Sesame Street. And nobody would pick up the book. But the mother, who was a writer on Sesame Street, kept on calling because she knew the value of getting it out there. So they came in, they were absolutely delightful. Dressed suit and tie, 18 and 20. I said, "You mean to tell me you've actually seen the inside of Oscar's trash barrel?" "Mrs. Andrews, it's cardboard." I mean, they were they were off Hawaii on the book tour on jet skis. The father fell in the drink, and the two of them kept on going.
So my first radio interview was after my first book, which was decades ago, 2 decades ago. So I was in the radio studio, and the host said to me, "Did I think that all the terrible things that are happening in the world were because mystery writers were writing about them?" My first interview. And I thought about that for about a split second, and I thought, if only the world were as orderly, as
The book,
comforting,
as
the
organized.
ending as a mystery novel, the world would be a much safer place.
about every 10 or 15 years, I go back and read On the Beach.
Oh,
You want to get scared?
yeah.
Right out of here. I mean, 75% of everything in that book has come to fruition, and it was written 20 years before it even started.
Yeah.
No, how long did that interview last?
It seemed like forever.
What do you enjoy most? The writing, the getting it accepted, or the public interviews in book clubs and libraries?
I hate the blank page. Let's just say that. People say, "What do you hate about writing?" I say writing. The blank page is, I always say, it's like coming up with ideas, formulating them, getting them on the page. It's like pushing wood through a meat grinder for me. It's really hard work. I love having written. I love being able to edit something, being able to reshape it, being able to print it out, write on it, cut it apart, rearrange it, and make it sing. And then the great pleasure is meeting people and getting to talk about your work, like now. I mean, that's such a gift. So the hardest part, though, is actually writing the book.
How about when the box comes, do you pick out the cover or does your publisher do it?
Yeah, I don't get to pick out the cover. What happens is I'm published by HarperCollins, and I'm published by HarperCollins, and they have a whole part of the publishing house that deals with the look of the product. So I usually get asked, what do I think the cover should be? And I usually come up with a couple of ideas, and sometimes they like those ideas and sometimes they don't. And they will then send me 3 or 4 mock-ups of a cover with the name of the book and my name. And so this one, they sent me, I think, 3 or 4 different houses. They wanted a house. My books take place in houses. People say, where are your books set? I say houses.
Neighborhoods, like we live in.
In houses. And I loved that there was this window and the woman looking out, and that's my character, I think, of course. I loved the colors, the turquoise and the gold. And then this star, there's a little star that I'm sure your viewers can't see, but that got added at the very end. And I love that because it goes with the title, Careful What You Wish For. Yeah.
Well, that's the outside of the book. And we're going to break now, and we will treat you when we come back to a teeny segment of the well-written book so you can judge for yourself. Be right back.
So this is the opening of Careful What You Wish For, Chapter 1. Emily Harlow wasn't convinced that her sock drawer sparked joy. Her socks had once been a jumbled mess stuffed in the top drawer of the mahogany bureau she'd inherited from her grandmother. She'd tried to follow the decluttering guru's mantra, keeping only those socks that spoke to her heart, and arranging them just so they stood at attention, paired and folded, starting at the toe, and sorted by color. Months later, bright and early on this muggy August morning, as she stood in her sunlit bedroom in her shorts, tank top, and flip-flops, the message those socks whispered to her heart was more about privilege than joy. Who on earth needed this many pairs of socks? Still, sock sorting had been life-changing. On a whim, as she'd done it, she took a sequence of snapshots, then assembled the stills into a stop-motion video. Herky-jerky animated progression showing the transformation from chaotic to tidy, with a few socks saluting the camera in the process, and ending with a selfie of her grinning as she deposited a bag of discards in the Goodwill collection bin, dissolved to a final shot of her newly ordered sock drawer. Watching that video did spark joy. She'd posted it on Instagram. Thousands of views and shares later, the Boston Globe ran a human interest story on Emily and her sock sorting video. A local morning TV show invited her on, and before she knew it, she had people reaching out and asking her to help them declutter their drawers and closets and film the process. That had been just before the school year ended, at a time when she was susceptible to any excuse not to go back to teaching. Once upon a time, she'd loved teaching, loved setting up her classroom in September, sorting her supply closet and stocking it with reams of paper and art supplies, meeting 25 fresh-faced third graders and introducing them to the wonders of fractions, the solar system, and Charlotte's Web. But after 8 years of the East Hartwell system's relentless focus on tests, along with well-meaning parents who valued grammar and spelling over creativity and problem-solving, teaching itself no longer spoke to her heart, not in the uncomplicated way that her sock sorting did.
And I think all of us have had a moment like that, but not the bravery to get up and do it.
Oh, yeah.
I have spent all week going through my husband's T-shirt collection. And there had to be 150 T-shirts.
Oh.
Now we're down to 100, and I still have 2 drawers to go. but I wonder if this wasn't the impetus for me attacking.
Could be.
Yeah. Well done.
Thank you.
I am going back when time allows and read your other books. That's how much I enjoyed this. Would you please bring us the next book and come back and play with us
I have to
again?
write it first.
Well, we know that you can. How long does it take you to write one?
It takes me 2 years.
2 years.
And I haven't started, so.
Well, it'll come to you.
Yeah. It actually takes me a year to write a book, and then it's another year in
Process.
process. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But when you open that box and you see the finished product, that's got to be something.
It is. It is. It feels, especially the first time, your very first book, the first time that
It's going to feel like being pregnant for 2 years.
and then finally seeing that baby, and it doesn't yell at you or demand to be fed. So.
Thank you for
Thank you
joining
very
us.
much.
It's
Thank you.
good to have you with us.
Thank you.
That's it for Off the Shelf, Books on Tour. Be careful what you wish for. If you have a nice, quiet time when demands aren't on you, by all means, spend a delightful time with this book. See you next time around. Bye.